And ask questions afterwards. My name is Kent Thomas, for those of you who don't know me. I'm 5 years into retirement, and I have to tell you, it's the best part of life. Absolutely the best part of life. If you don't know me, I started Advanced CFO, that's now Amplio, 26 years ago, when being an outsourced CFO wasn't cool. Had a great experience, but frankly, being retired with grandchildren and traveling is much better than any of that. I want to start out and say, to one perspective, I apologize that you have me here today because I wasn't the first choice. I was somewhere down the road, down the low, and it reminds me of a story when you're substituting from someone. A story a little about I don't know if you know anything about the Quaker Church or not, but in the Quaker Church, people actively participate in their services. And on one particular occasion, the pastor of the Quaker Church got to church one day, and he learned that the individual who was planning to give a very nice solo wasn't able to come. They were sick. And here's one of the things you want to remember: don't ever go to church early because you get asked to do things. So there was a gentleman sitting in the back just kind of waiting for church to start, and the pastor went up to him and said, I really need your help. Our musical selection can't be here today. Would you substitute for them? And he's like, I can't sing. I don't even know what it is. And he just kept asking him and asking him. And finally he said, okay. And he was so nervous. And the musical selection was to come right at the end of the service. So he got up. He was off key. I mean, he had the music, and he forgot words, and it was a horrible performance. And he sat down, and they had the closing prayer, and he was headed for the door, never to darken that door again in his entire life because he felt awful. And as he went outside, and it was going outside, one of the older gentlemen of the church grabbed him by the arm and took him and said, "Thou shouldst not feel bad. Thou didst thy very best. 'Tis he who asked thee should be shot." So if you don't like what happens today, I'll tell you who asked me, and then you can direct your fire the right place. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about being a strategic partner as a CFO and sort of value-added partner relationships. Now, if you look at the title, it says with the CEO, and I changed that, right? They asked me, I said yes. What are they going to do? I'm going to talk about being a strategic partner throughout the organization and why it's important for a CFO. And this is just a list of some logos of a few of the companies that I served with over the course of my career. Had a great time. During my time at Advanced CFO, we served well over 1,000 clients. I was the CFO of 85 different companies. Now that sounds like a bad case of ADHD, doesn't it? I just can't hold a job, and that's probably true. I don't think I could ever work for anyone again. But anyway, these are just a few of the great companies and where I had some wonderful experiences and a lot of time. And we're going to talk about a few of the experiences I had along with this. But I want to talk identify a little bit about what does it mean to be a strategic CFO. So I'd like you to just look through those 6 bullet points and think about which one of those are really strategic. You answer it for yourself, and then we'll go on. So, accurate financial statement. Now, I put the 5th of the month there to be, that's really pretty darn good, right? But is it strategic? No, it's not. It's not even close to being strategic. Accounting and finance team understand their duties. In other words, you've got a team that is running like a well-oiled machine, and everything is done right. Is that strategic? No. Annual budgets completed by November 15th? No. You could get them by October 15th. Would it make a difference? It wouldn't make any difference. Frankly, I don't like annual budgets personally. We tried to get away from that and do a rolling budget, and just so we were constantly moving forward, timed right along with our forecasts as we were working on it. A lot more powerful and a lot more helpful, and it doesn't take as much time. Regular meetings with department heads to explain financial results. You're making progress, but that's still not strategic, is it? Why would I say that? You're just explaining the results. That's the key. That is not strategic. This is all scorekeeping. It's all looking in the rearview mirror. And I don't know the last time you tried, but when I tried driving my car just looking at the rearview mirror, I run into problems. And that's a challenge. What about the next one? Let's see. Offer to assist marketing and sales with product pricing analysis assignment. Why is that strategic and the rest aren't? And here's the other thing that is important to me, that word right there. I wasn't assigned. As a CFO, we're in a meeting. We talked about a product pricing analysis that was necessary. That should happen periodically. And I said, hey, I can help you out. Let's get together and let's work on this together. And let's make a difference. Is it because I want to control what's going on there? Is it because I don't trust the sales guys and the marketing people to do this? No. It's because I want to add value. Next one, meet and survey board members to evaluate current board reporting. Why would I consider that as strategic? I may just be really wanting, because I don't want the board members to bug me anymore, right? I don't want to hear the complaints, so I just want to, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. I really want to understand what do those board members need and what do they want. Now, in my world today, since retirement, my only access to and work on business is as a board member. So this is a really important one to me. So if you're the CFO of the company where I'm a board member, we're going to talk about this. And the way we report will be very different than how most people report to the boards. So I just want to give a sense of what really is strategic and what isn't in terms of what we do. I love this quote. This comes from a large enterprise software company CEO, Amplio. It was actually an advanced CFO survey, but we did it some time ago, and I like what he says. Finance, while it doesn't actually own the strategy, and it doesn't, is responsible for being the institutional memory of the company and offering a framework against which we can present our strategic choices of how we're going to develop as a company. Finance makes sure the right choices are framed up. And I like that as a definition of finance's roles. And by the way, if you'd like, I'm going to give somebody a PDF of these slides. So if you'd like them, I don't know, who do they talk to? John, do you know?
Send a note to Haley.
Okay.
We'll relay it out.
All right. So Haley, you might want to come up here after and give them a way to get in touch with you, okay? So I'm happy to give these out. None of you are my competitors, so I don't care what you know.
We have the attendee list, so we'll actually get it.
Okay, great. You'll get it. So I like this because it gives a sense of what's finance perspective on when it comes to strategy in the company. Now, when I think about being a strategic CFO, I have 4 pieces. The C-suite's financial partner. That's everybody in the C-suite. That's all the key officers of the company working together and being their partner in finance. That's why I changed this from just CEO. It's the entire suite. You should be working with all of them. I consider a good CFO the chief future officer, the chief trust officer, and an advisor to the board of directors. If you're doing your role correctly, you're going to fill these roles in your company. So let's talk about the C-suite strategic financial partner. I give credit to Dave for this one. What do I mean when I say the dial tone is always on? The things that you're supposed to do. Remember the first 4 questions on the very first slide? That stuff just happens. And it happens every day, and it happens consistently, and it's never off. We always deliver. We have that well-oiled machine. Our people know what they're doing. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you attended the technology session that was here just right before me, but there's a company in there talking about the bots that they use. Is anybody in here using bots to do reconciliations and those things that we spend our time? Is anybody in here? Oh, okay, good for you. All the rest of you, I'm calling you to repentance. You need to start thinking about this. You need to stop doing things manually, and that includes in Excel spreadsheets. You need to stop doing reconciliations. The technology is there. I said years ago, 10 years ago, accountants, clerks, are dinosaurs. I love them to death. We don't need them. They shouldn't be doing any work in our businesses anymore. It's time to automate everything that can possibly be automated. How else can you do your job as a CFO? If you're focused on the dial tone, you can't do your job. You don't have time to go meet with the salespeople and help them with the pricing analysis. You just don't have time. And sometimes your head is so much into the details, you can't take a step back and look and say, does this even make sense? You've got to be able to do that. So anyway, they did not offer me a commission for making that statement, by the way. I've been saying it for years. So some of the things, regulatory compliance, it just happens. We don't miss deadlines. We don't miss, I can't even tell you what I've seen over the course of my career. The websites that were not renewed, right? The domain names. What was the big one? Oh, yes, Park City Resort. Can you imagine? Can you possibly imagine a lease that didn't get renewed that is the basis of over 50% of your resort? What the hell do? You sell because you have to. You've killed yourself. You just shot yourself. This is our job. It just has to happen, always on. Timely, accurate, and useful reporting, not just financial statements. Financial statements aren't that important, let's be honest. They're not that valuable. I can't tell you how many CEOs I've talked to, probably 1,000 over the years, and I ask them, what do they do with their financial statements? You know what they tell me? We look at them, we talk about them, I put them in a drawer, and I never see them again. Now, here's the question that causes them some concern. Do you realize how much that financial statement cost you to produce? What was the return on the investment? Financial statements are not that valuable. And most of your executives in the company do not understand them, they can't read them, and they don't know how to interpret what it means. Why do we do financial statements? It's a compliance issue, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying they're not important, but they're not valuable in your job as a CFO on a day-to-day basis. So stop thinking about how we make them so much better. Get them right. They've got to be accurate. They've got to be timely. And the reporting, all the reporting has to be useful to everyone. If you aren't meeting with the production team, with the sales team, with the marketing team, with the development team, if you're not meeting with those people, how do you know what is useful and what isn't? By the way, they don't come and tell you. And they frequently won't even ask because they don't know what's available. It's our job. Get out of your office. Stop doing the detailed stuff. Get out of your office and start talking to people. And you have to provide transparency to support accountability. 100% transparency. We tell the good, we tell the bad, we tell the indifferent. Doesn't matter. You need to anticipate these executive needs. You need the attitude of a service provider. So as an outsourced CFO, when I was in a company and I'm serving as the outsourced CFO, my contracts weren't a year long. They could be terminated at any time. If my clients aren't getting value from the work I'm giving them, I can be terminated next week. That gives me a different perspective on what I'm trying to do. I want to know what is valuable. What do you need to know? What is going to help you do better in your job, in developing and increasing the value of the business? How do I do that? You've got to get out of your office to make that happen. If your primary responsibility, if your decision on whether you stayed in your position was based on how much value you're actually adding to the company instead of the dial tone, would it change how you do your job? I submit to you that it would. That it will change your job, and you should be thinking about yourself that way. Have you noticed that there are fewer COOs in today's world? Who's doing that job now? It's the CFO. It's a natural place for it to go. So you need to be thinking like one. Even if you have one, you need to be thinking one. And if you have one, that should be one of your best friends right there, working together and understanding the operations. And you need to be unbiased, even if it means you have to admit you made a mistake. Your group isn't doing its job. Now, we'll talk about this in just a second and why that's so important. But your analysis has to be absolutely unbiased. No spin. CFOs are not allowed to spin the results. You have the access to it. You've got all the data. You could spin it if you want. If you do, it'll be murder. You'll be sorry in the long run. We'll talk about that in a minute. And everything you do has to have recommendations. Everything we do. We'll talk about this in a second. Sometimes CFOs are known as the chief no officer. That shouldn't be. Because whenever you give a no as an answer, which you have to do from time to time, right? It's part of your job. Every time you give a no, there has to be explanation and recommendations, always, to go along with it. When I ran businesses and people would come to me and say, we've got a problem, or, well, yeah, we've got a problem, I would say, okay, what's the problem and what's the recommendation? You know what they would say? I don't know, I'm just telling you there's a problem. I would say, go out, leave, go away, come back when you can tell me what a recommended solution is. I don't have all the answers. How in the world am I going to do that? So you got to bring that. Every time you bring a problem, every time there's an issue, you've got to have recommendations. By the way, this is not a lecture, so let's talk. Got questions? You want to challenge me? I'm good with that. You can't offend me. It's impossible.
I just have a question. I've been called the chief no officer. But when you, maybe I'm just thinking this wrong, but I feel like if I'm giving a recommendation, sometimes that can be shown to the other people on the executive team as bias. Does that make sense? Like, I'm looking, make my own like personal opinion into it. Is that just showing the numbers? Is that what you're saying that with the recommendation?
No,
Does that make sense? How you
Yeah,
do
no.
bias?
Here's what I would say first. Build a relationship first. If you're talking to the sales VP and you're going to say no, there's a good chance that he'll get defensive or she will get defensive or that they will misunderstand it. But if I've got a relationship and if they know that my goal, my primary goal in life and with this company is to help you do your job, because I do understand that if we don't sell anything, there's nothing to account for. Finance isn't why the company exists. Not even close. Sales, my closest relationship was with the salespeople. How can I help them be more successful? Knowing that, when I said no, they listened, they respected, and they knew that they were going to get an unbiased view of things. I'm trying to help you do your job. And when you know that, it makes all the difference in the world. Does that make sense? So build the relationship first. That's right. That's right. You know what the definition of an outgoing accountant is, right? They look at your shoes when you're talking to them instead of their own. That's supposed to be funny. Got to get out of your office. You got to build relationships. You got to get outside of what your comfort zone. That's critical if you're going to do the job of a good CFO. Now, let's talk about the Chief Future Officer. One of the first things that you have to think about is how do we support profitable planned growth? You're working on the forecast. You know what it is. Tyler just talked about all of the metrics and all the levers and everything that goes into that process and understanding the business. You have to know those, and you're working with all of your fellow executives so you understand where we're headed. Now, how do we support that growth? And it has to be profitable in the end. Oh, believe me, I've worked with a lot of venture and private equity-backed companies, and we spend a lot of money and we go way into the negative, but eventually it's got to come up, right? Even though that our government doesn't understand this concept. Eventually, the profitability has to come, and we've got to be able to show that that's where we're going. So how do we support that? One of the things is the company needs access to capital. Whose job is it to make sure that we're getting capital at the right cost, at the best cost we can? That's our job. To build a financing plan around how is this business going to work? How are we going to make it happen? Where are we getting the money? How much can we do? Tyler earlier talked also about underfunding growth, underfunding our sales efforts, and we do that a lot. We do that because we think we need to raise $500,000, but we only raise $400,000, and so we short the one area that will hurt the company the most. So we have to be careful. That's our job, by the way, to help make sure that happens. The next one is we need processes and rules for allocation of capital. It can't just go, I could tell you so many stories, I'm sorry, but I can tell you so many ways not for this not to be done correctly, right? A certain branded company that where the CEO would include the opening of a new retail location every time they would raise capital, so that it didn't go through the same scrutiny in terms of whether it was going to be profitable or not. Now you take that one where 7 of the 25 open stores had to be closed because they weren't in good locations. They were never profitable. Take that and go to Spring Communications. You all know Spring, right? The cell phone retailer. Very profitable business. I joined them at about 24 stores, replaced myself at about 65 stores. They were doing $70 million in revenue. In those 65 stores, they had only closed 3 in their entire operation. The opening of a store was a well-planned, very, very conscientious event. And there was a template built. The construction, everything was down to a dime and an exact science. And retail was everything, right? They had to be in the right place. The demographics had to be well understood. What's the area that we draw from? And if we open this store, what does it do to the other store that we have? They had that dialed. And the CEO was 36 years old. Brilliant kid, Jason Ellis, great guy, good friend of mine. But this process of allocating capital, where is it going to go and is it going to the right place? We have to make sure that happens. And then we have to overcome or relax constraints. All the constraints that you face can't be overcome, right? You may have a regulatory restraint, and you may not be able to overcome that for a period of time. You may have a restraint on being able to hire all good people in the middle of COVID. Anybody had a problem with people? Everybody has a problem with people. So what are we going to do? We've got to be thinking strategically. How are we going to overcome or relax these constraints? What are we going to have to do differently? One of the companies that I serve on board on just announced we are 100% virtual. Why? Because we had 7 key positions we couldn't fill until we decided to go virtual, and then suddenly we got someone in London, we got somebody in Atlanta, Georgia, we got another person in Brazil. Perfect fit. But they're not moving to Utah. No thank you. No interest. And it works. Now, there are some challenges with having your company 100% remote. Tyler talked about those earlier. Got to be aware of that. But you've got to find creative ways to help the company overcome or relax their constraints. You've got to manage risks. What are the key risks? Let's go back up to constraints. You need to know, and you better be thinking about what the constraints are on your business. You really need to know that. And you need to be working with your management team and with your board on that particular issue. And risks, it's our job to understand what happens if, what could possibly happen. What are the things that are hanging out there that we have concerns about? Do we have product liability issues? What is it? What is it that's out there that we need to be concerned about? How do we manage those? How are we going to get through it? Uncertainties, boy, did COVID ever teach us about uncertainties? And I don't know if you noticed, and your companies may or may not had a plan for this or not, but some companies did really, really well. So managing for the uncertainty can be, how are we going to provide all of the demand that will suddenly come? At Skull Candy, the biggest single problem we ever had was financing growth. Biggest single problem. So the company had just done just over $9 million in revenue the prior year. We're into February or March, and by the way, we just finally, for the first time, we weren't factoring anymore because we got to profitability. And we got to Zions Bank, and we got I think it was $1.5 million or $2 million line of credit. Man, it took everything I had to get that job done. We got it. We were ready to go. It's February or March, we get a PO from Target. Initial sales with Target were, and their commitment was, we're going to put you in 50 stores, we're going to try it out, we're going to see what happens. We got a PO for somewhere around $3 million for 2/3 of their stores. Jeremy Andrus, who was the COO, and I were dying. Everybody else was high-fiving. Rick Alden was, this is the greatest thing since the world, and the salespeople were, and we're like, Jeremy said, I can't provide it. I can't fill those POs. I can't do it. He was the COO. I'm saying, I can't finance it. I don't have that much money. I've got this line of credit, and I needed twice that. So we sat down, we talked, and of course, Rick at this point in time called me the Chief No Officer because actually my title there was Rent-a-Foe, just so you know. But he called me, he said, man, you're just too negative about this. And I go, well, I'm sorry, but let's be realistic. But Jeremy was brilliant. As we sat down and talked about it, Jeremy said, okay, he looked at the PO and he recognized that Target was buying orange and red. He couldn't get camel because that could only go to the surf shops. But he got all these different colors, and he went back to Target and said, we appreciate the PO. We'd like to cut it in half. And we'll fill all of that, but what you need are black and white and silver and just a couple of colors. You don't need that broad spectrum because your customer won't buy them. They won't buy them, right? The mantra there was conservative will buy edgy, but edgy will never buy conservative. And they were brilliant with that. That was a great marketing tactic. But so here's what happened. So we went back and convinced them to cut back their PO. We do all the stores, but we're going to do a lot less items. And we said, look, we'll sell through quickly, and we'll be able to. We just can't give it to you that fast. We're just too small. And they were cool about that. But to even do what we did, I had to go to Zions and ask for an overline. Right? Go to Zions Bank and ask them for an overline. Just try that the first time. We got it. We did. I don't know how. We got a $500,000 overline from Zions. And I'll tell you how, is because we went and said, well, have you ever heard of this company named Target? And that made all the difference. So we made it happen. Here's the cool thing about it. Had we given them their original PO, the way they lined them up, we would have never sold through the product. It was the wrong product selection for their stores. Had we not sold through the product, guess what Target would have done with product? They would send it back. Whether they could or not, they would have sent it back, and we would have been on the dog list. Take the alternative. Cut it in half, get the right product in their hands. They spun it so fast that within 45 days they had a complete reorder. They expanded to all the stores, and we were the hottest, fastest moving item on the list. So I'm not telling you that I was the guy. This was Jeremy, but there's strategy for you, right? There's how you go to managing your risks and the uncertainties and the constraints, and how do you make them work. So that's why you need to be working with the other people in your organization. The other thing the other biggest risk that we have to do, I believe, is manage the status quo. What we're doing is not going to work. How many times has your company had to reinvent itself? We did it at Advanced CFO, right, JB?
Many times.
How many times? Many times, right? Everything changed. Technology comes and suddenly it's a whole different world. We're not doing the same things we used to do. If you knew what my business was like in 1997, you would, well, yeah, you're all too young. You wouldn't know anyway. But we had to change, and you have to keep doing it, and you have to keep doing it internally. In your organization as well as with your company, constantly challenge the status quo. There's probably a better way. And you need to anticipate disruption from your competitor, from economic sources, and internally. You should be looking at how do we disrupt our internal organization. CFO's job. And then key, improve the predictability, for crying out loud. Improve the predictability. It's where data analysis, metrics, innovation, automation, this is where it all comes in. You get predictable when you get better information and you have it more consistently, and you can better understand what the drivers are of your business so that you can look forward and start to forecast. Now, forecasts are not easy, and they're never exactly right, but you got to get better at forecasting and improving the predictability of what you're doing. See what time is here. Okay. Chief Trust Officer. Honesty, integrity, and humility. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I screwed up. We messed up. If something goes wrong in finance and accounting, it's your job. It's your responsibility. Take credit. Take responsibility. It's critical that you do that. And you got to be humble enough to say, wasn't just me. It's the entire team that deserves the credit. You'll be shocked at how much that drives people. And accountability at all levels. You've got to hold the CEO accountable. That is your job. This is another quote from that survey. A CFO that doesn't stand up to the CEO has no place being the senior financial executive in the company. You've got to be able to hold them accountable. Not a great idea to do it in a board meeting. Okay, let's be smart. Again, relationships, talking, preparing, working together, and in that private session behind the door, hold them accountable. Right? I used to say that when I would go into a company, there were a couple of rules that I had, absolutes. Number one was you cannot veto any decision I make about the finance and accounting staff. No veto. I won't allow it. I won't hire or fire without talking to you, but if I decide they're gone, they're gone. You can put them somewhere else in the organization, I don't care. They're not working for me. Okay? Why would I do that? You should do the same thing. You are being held accountable for the results, right? Does any CEO have a problem holding you responsible for problems that happen in your organization? And if you have someone who isn't doing their job, who doesn't know what to do, what's going to happen? You're going to have problems. And you want to get rid of them, and the CEO says no. You know what I would say to that? See you later. I'm out. I will not be held responsible for something I can't control. So you've got to work with your CEO that way. And I would have CEOs who look at me and say, well, you can't do that. And I go, okay, that's fine. I'm not coming. Let's figure this out. Again, relationships allows this to happen, and trust. I did this one before. No always has to have explanations and suggestions, always. And you've got to be completely transparent. You've got to tell it the way it is. If somebody is spinning it, if somebody's spinning what's going on, you've got to be the guy who calls it out. And then you've got to build loyalty and commitment with your outside stakeholders. Can I tell you how many times I came into companies because the CFO was not honest with the vendors, suppliers, others? Many times. Lost all trust. Why was he not honest? Because he didn't want to say, we can't pay you this week. He would make a promise and then wouldn't fill the promise. He would promise to get back to them and never call them back. Those kind of CFOs get fired. It's amazing what people will do for you when you're honest with them and upfront. I can't tell you how many workouts we did over the course of the years, and that's the one thing you always do. 100% honesty. If it's bad news, you give it to them. You give it to them fast. Let's see, didn't I see a banker in here somewhere? I saw it. Didn't I see a banker? Maybe not. Ah, there he is. So let me give you this scenario. So what if I'm in a company and I'm the CFO and we're going to have problems and we are going to violate our covenants? I can see it coming. When do you want to know about that? The day that it's due or the 2 months before when I'm aware of it? And if I tell you 2 months before, are you going to shut down my loan and call it? Why not? But if I wait until 3 months after I did it and I don't give you information and then you find out, what are you more likely to do then? That's right. I've never had a bank call a loan or be punitive when I went to them in advance and say, look, we got a problem. Here's what it is. And again, remember before I said you've always got to provide solutions and recommendations, right? So he's not going to love it if I just come and say, well, we're going to violate the covenant. Sorry. What he wants me to hear is, what he wants to hear is, here's why, here's what we've done, and here's what we're going to do in the future, right? I've never had a bank refuse to work with me in that scenario, ever. So it's got to be the same way with all of your stakeholders, everything you're doing. Now, a board advisor. Most people don't think of this role. It's even more critical to me today as a board member. And a board member really looks to the CFO to really understand what's going on. You as a CFO have fiduciary responsibilities to all shareholders. So how many of you in here have outside investors invested in your company? Have any of those investors, do all of those investors have everyone's best interest at heart? Seriously, Morgan, they don't? You mean the Series B might not really care what happens to the common shareholders?
That is true.
Yeah, it's amazing. Is that okay? Yes. Who's the Series B shareholder representing? The Series B. Who does the CFO represent? All shareholders. So when the Series B talks about a very punitive action, what does the CFO need to do? You got to call it out. You got to talk about it. You got to say, hold on, wait just a second. I can't tell you how many of those conversations I've had over the years. No, listen, you really don't want to do that. Let me tell you what will happen. If you go to a pay-to-play on this next round and you crush everybody down, you take this 43% of the common and you crush it down to 5%. Let me tell you what will happen. And you can make a difference. But your job, you have a fiduciary responsibility to all shareholders. Don't forget that. You need to know each board member and what they need and what they want. Again, build relationships, get to know them. They're in for town, ask them if you can go to dinner together. Ask them if you can spend some time. I want to know you. I want to understand what you need, what I can do to help you. Provide the whole story with analysis and recommendations. So anybody ever gone to a board meeting and had to tell we didn't quite make the projections? Oh yeah. So just be honest about it. Own it. Let them know. Talk about it. Be prepared again, just like your banker, right? Here's what happened. Here's why. Here's what we've changed. This is what's going to happen in the future. It's important. Board members, they need to trust you. They also expect you to be the champion of ethics throughout the organization. And this is my favorite part. This is not the last one. In today's world, you need to be talking about sustainability and social responsibility. Whether you like it or not, it's going to affect your business eventually. And you don't want to be canceled because you're not doing this stuff. So think about that. But here's my last one. I love it. You got to call out all the elephants in the room. And that happens sometimes in board meetings. I've been known to say, there's something going on here. There's that, you've heard the term elephant in the room. I think we've got one, and it looks like it's purple and pink and really ugly, and it's sitting right on that table, and nobody wants to talk about it. Why don't we just have the conversation? Because we need to get it out. But a lot of people won't do that. It's your job. Call out the elephant in the room. Let's discuss it. Let's see what's going on. It may be a pet project. It may be the way we're investing in something. It may be somebody's favorite product. I don't know what it is, but sometimes they will avoid it at all costs. Your job is to call that elephant out. Good. So that's my presentation. I'd love to have any questions, comments. I could tell stories all day, but you don't want to hear my stories. Anybody have any thoughts? Any questions that you're specifically facing? Yes, in the back.
One of the points was working with your bank partners and having managing the costs to have finances put in place. Is it important to more deal with ownership and CEO to move towards what could be much cheaper versus what preference is?
You're saying working with the CEO and ownership versus the other people in the organization?
On the balance between what's actually cheaper and better versus what their personal preference is when it comes to like where you go for the financing.
Okay. Well, I mean, your job is to find the lowest cost of capital, right, that will meet the needs that you have. That's your responsibility, right? If their preference is going to cost more, you've got to call that out. But again, doing this in a private setting with the relationship helps a lot to make that happen, especially if it's a CEO or board members or whatever. I've had board members who are investors who say, oh, we'll just take care of that financing, don't worry about it. You don't have preference on that. You don't have right of first refusal. We're going to go to the market and see what the market will give us. You're welcome to participate unless it's written in the documents, and then that was a mistake, right? But yeah, you've got to work within the constraints you have, but your job is to call out what's the best thing for the company. You don't always get it, right? They won't always agree with you. That's okay, but it's still your job to do it. Anyone else? If not, it's been great being with you again. It's fun to come back, and I'm going to go back to my retired life, so have a great life.